In this video, we'll be looking at a new feature of Plait, which is the calculation of holiday pay for care workers, and specifically the calculation required according to current UK employment legislation. To use this calculation, the setup is very straightforward. All you need to do is make sure that for your organisation, there is a tick in the Track Leave Entitlement box on the Employment tab. And then for each of the event types that you use for care worker leave, that there is a tick in the Is Leave box. So when adding an event to one of your care workers' calendars where the event type has a tick in this box, you will be using the holiday pay calculation that I will describe now. We're going to take a look at one of the care workers in the sample data, Robert White. And if we look on Robin's calendar, we will see that he is on holiday this week. This is a week-long holiday. So we're going to be looking at how the pay for this holiday will be calculated. The first thing we need to do is establish which days of that 7-day period we should be paying Robert for, and that is going to be dependent upon his regular work pattern. So if we look at the next week, and indeed all future weeks, we will see that Robert regularly works on Mondays, Wednesdays and Fridays. If we go back to the holiday event, that means therefore he will be expecting to receive holiday pay for Monday the 19th of April, Wednesday the 21st and Friday the 23rd. So we know that we are looking to calculate 3 days of pay for Robert. The question is how much to pay on each of those 3 days. It might seem logical to again refer to his regular work pattern and to calculate the normal pay for those 3 days of events and to use that as the basis of the calculation. But current UK employment legislation instead requires us to look at historical data. It requires us to look a number of weeks up to the holiday to look at the amount that the employee was paid for those weeks, to calculate the average that they were paid for an individual day across those weeks, and to use that average daily pay total as the basis of the holiday pay calculation. Now, the number of weeks that we need to look across is quite specifically laid out in the legislation. It says that we should be looking for 52 weeks of historical data. So we're going to look for a whole year of data and we are going to calculate the average daily pay across that year. Now in the case of an employee who has joined your organization more recently than a year ago, there is not going to be 52 weeks worth of data available, and in that case the legislation says that we should simply use as much data as we have. So let's take a look at Robert's case. If we go back to the week prior to the holiday, we see that Robert worked and was paid for 4 days. The week prior to that, 3 days, that's 7. And the week prior to that, another 3 days, that's 10. If we go back one further week, we see that there is no data, and that is because Robert's employment began on the 29th of March. So we have 3 weeks of data available for our sample, and we know that Robert worked 10 days during those 3 weeks. So if we calculate the total pay amount for the 3 weeks and divide that by 10, we will establish his average daily pay. If we multiply that average daily pay by 3, that's the Monday, Wednesday and Friday that he is expecting to be paid during his holiday. That will produce the final pay amount that we should be providing for that holiday. So let's see that in action. We'll go back to today and we will click on the holiday event and select Edit, Edit with tabbed screen. And then we're going to go to the Caregivers tab, and here we will see the holiday pay amount has been calculated for us automatically as £241.72. To see how that figure was reached, we click and the calculation summary is displayed. So from the summary we can see that the number of weeks that was used for the sample was 3. We can see the total amount that Robert was paid for events during those 3 weeks was this sum, and the total amount he was paid for travel was this sum. It's important to note that this is travel pay and it is not travel or mileage expenses. Indeed, there is no expenses included in any of the totals used here. They are not relevant to the holiday pay calculation. So Robert received a total of £805.74 during those 3 weeks, and he was paid for 10 days of work, which means his average daily pay was £80.57. Paying him for 3 days as we are means that he will be receiving for this holiday a total pay of £241.72. The only flexibility that is provided in relation to this calculation is adjusting the number of days that will be paid. So, for example, if a care worker takes a half-day holiday, or if they take unpaid leave, perhaps because they haven't accrued sufficient entitlement for the holiday, but the holiday is nonetheless granted, you can adjust the leave days paid accordingly. So if we wanted to make this unpaid leave, it would simply be a case of changing that value to 0. Of course, in that case, the cost for the event and the total pay becomes 0 as well. If we clear that override and return to the 3 days that has been calculated for us, we can click on the link to see which of the days during that holiday the care worker is being paid for. And as expected, it is the Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. So it is hoped that in most cases the data that is provided in the calculation summary here will be sufficient to inform all relevant parties of how this total was derived. However, further detail is provided in case of you needing to analyze that further, or if there's some queries or disputes. So to view an extra level of detail, click on the view link and you will see that we then can look at the weeks that make up our sample individually, and for each week we can see the number of days that were paid and the total event pay and the total travel pay. Going one step further still, we can click on any of the individual weeks to see each event that makes up the totals for that particular week, the event pay and the travel pay in each case. In this case, we only have 3 sample weeks, so there's not a huge amount of data to digest, but if we did have up to the possible maximum of 52 weeks, then clearly there's going to be a huge amount of data, and it's going to be very difficult to analyze that on screen in this form. If it is necessary to analyze that data, which we certainly hope it wouldn't be, but in the case of a dispute or a question, if that data needs to be analyzed, you can download it. This will download a CSV file that you can open in Excel or another spreadsheet of your choice, and you'll see there that there is one row in that spreadsheet for each individual event, and that is across all of the sample weeks that have been used in the calculation. So that is how the holiday pay calculation is performed. Let's see how we can actually pay that holiday event. It is quite simply a case of running payroll as normal. So if we go to our organization and select Generate Pay Advice, we'll do a run just for Robert for simplicity's sake, and we will select a cutoff date just after the holiday. And payroll is now running in the background. Let's go back to our care worker. Return to his calendar, click on the holiday event and go to the caregivers tab, and now we'll find under transactions that there is now a reference to a payslip. This is where the holiday event has been paid. You'll notice too that the leave paid field, this is the one where we adjusted the number of paid days earlier, is now locked, and that's because this event has now been paid. If we click through to the pay advice, we'll see a line there for the holiday. We can see details of it, the fact that 3 days have been paid and what the average daily pay amount was for those 3 days. Now, the way that this would be presented in a printed payslip is going to be dependent upon the particular layout that your organization uses, and that will be a conversation to have with ourselves. Let's go back now and take again a look at the detail of the calculation. I'm going to look at the breakdown and specifically at the most recent week. You'll notice that the sample weeks are done in descending order, so the most recent one is at the top. And let's click on there. And you'll notice here that in most cases, there is a pay advice number shown here. So this is the reference to the payslip where those care events was paid. But you'll notice that in 3 cases, there are events with no pay advice. If in a perfect world, you would hope that that would never happen. You would hope that you will run payroll for the events that precede the holiday. They will all have been paid, and then the holiday will then be paid, and it will use the amounts that were paid as a means of establishing the average daily pay and therefore the holiday pay. But it is possible that you will have events at the time when the holiday is being paid that haven't yet been finalized and haven't yet been paid, and that is the case with these three events here. Let's go back to the caregiver's calendar, and if we go back to the week preceding the holiday, this is one of those events that hasn't yet been paid. You'll notice that there's no dark line on either side of the event. The care worker never touched into this event. Perhaps it never happened at all. In this case, we have somewhat of a problem because we have paid the holiday event based upon a holiday pay calculation that has taken into account this event, but has taken into account a projection of what the amount is that we're expecting to pay that care worker. If this event subsequently changes, then the calculated holiday pay amount is going to change too and will prove to be incorrect. So let's take an example. Let's just say, for example, that this event did happen, and in fact it was a longer event than was scheduled. So rather artificially, I'm just going to increase the length of that event now. If we go back to the holiday, let's see the effect that that will have on the holiday pay calculation. We'll return again to the Caregivers tab, and you'll see now that there are going to be two numbers displayed here. We see the amount that has been most recently paid for this holiday. That's the amount from the payslip that we generated a minute ago, the £241 number that we have looked at. But we'll see that there is now a new number. This is the current amount. So this is based upon what the data looks like now. This is based upon what the data looked like at the point of the holiday being calculated. And they are slightly different, not surprisingly. If we click on both links, we can see a side-by-side analysis of the difference. So based upon current data and based upon the data at the point when the holiday was paid, the data, the numbers shown in red highlight where the differences are. And if we want to look further, we can look at the side-by-side analysis of the sample weeks, and we can see it was this week, the Sunday 11th of April week, where the difference was. So if we look at the current amount, based upon the current data, we see for that event that the care worker should be paid £22.15, and the travel from that event to the new event should be £225. But based upon how the data looked at the point when payroll was run for the holiday, it was a smaller number here because the event was shorter, and a bigger number here because the gap between the two events was longer. So you can see that subtly different event data causes a different holiday pay total to be calculated. And in this case, you've got a choice to make. Are you going to credit the pay advice that the holiday event was paid on and repay it? Of course, if you do that, then the care worker would receive the slightly higher holiday pay of £242.74 rather than what they have been paid, which was the £241.72. We can just make one final example of how changing event data can affect the holiday pay calculation. If we go back to the caregiver's calendar one last time, and we go back here, it could be that the reason that there was no touch in and touch out to that event is that it never happened. In that case, it may be that we're going to cancel that event. So let's do tab screen for that event and cancel it. We'll choose a reason for the cancellation, and perhaps it turns out that the care worker shouldn't receive any payment, so we're actually going to override the cancellation outcome and say that the multiplier for Robert's cost is going to be 0. That means he's not receiving any payment. And if we go back to his calendar one last time and again look at the holiday pay calculation, we'll see that it has now gone down. So the current calculation is now 235, which is around about £6 less than the amount that he was paid, which is not surprising because there's one fewer event that he is being paid for. So again, we can do the side-by-side analysis. We can do the look at the details. Again, we see what week it is. And now we can see that here is an event that has been paid for, the 1625, that is no longer in this week at all. So these analysis, it might seem like an awful lot of data, and we hope that in most cases you'll never need to look at this, but in the case of a dispute, or in the case where data is adjusted after a holiday pay calculation has been performed and paid, it may be necessary to see the details, and we hope that this provides, in a digestible way, access to the information that is used to calculate this holiday pay amount.